Today, we're diving into a really fascinating interpretation of a passage from the New Testament. The source, a sermon, explores this unique idea: how a wife might influence a husband who doesn't share her faith, but not with words, with her actions. So let's get right into it. And really, this whole thing boils down to one huge question. Can your behavior, just how you live your life, actually change someone else's core beliefs? Can your actions succeed where maybe arguments have failed? That's the central idea we're going to explore. All right, so here's how we'll break it down. First, we'll look at the basic premise, then the strategy the text proposes. After that, we'll get into the concepts of inner beauty and where that strength comes from. And finally, we'll see what the speaker says is the end result of all this: a fearless woman. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. The speaker is clear that this passage is aimed at a very specific situation. We're talking about a Christian wife whose husband does not obey the word, which the source interprets to mean he's an unbeliever. So what's the end game here? Well, the text says the goal is for the husband to be won over. And the speaker points out that in the New Testament, that language of winning people almost always refers to salvation. So the point is, these actions have a very specific, very high-stakes objective. So that leads to the next logical question. If the goal is to win him over, what's the strategy? How does the text say this is supposed to happen? And this is where we see a huge shift in tactics. The source argues that the way forward isn't through verbal pressure. Things that could feel like preaching or nagging or just constantly reminding him. Nope. The focus flips entirely to something that can be seen: her conduct, her respectful attitude, her overall character. And the verse itself couldn't be clearer. The emphasis is squarely on conduct. The idea is that the real influence comes from what the husband sees day in and day out. But what does without a word actually mean? Does it mean she should never speak? Well, the speaker clarifies that. No, it's not about total silence. It's about recognizing that in this particular dynamic, the main tool for influence isn't going to be another argument. It's her observable character. He has to see the reality of her faith before he might ever believe in it. So this idea of observable character leads us to a really interesting and kind of surprising turn in the text. It moves from behavior to beauty, and it contrasts two very different ways a woman might try to be influential. The speaker suggests that a common thought process might be, okay, I can win him over if I just look good enough, if I dress a certain way. But the text pretty much dismisses that. It actually de-emphasizes all the external stuff, fancy hair, jewelry, clothes, and points to something else entirely: an inner adornment, the hidden person of the heart. And this quote just nails it, right? The source of true, lasting, and genuinely influential beauty, according to this passage, is something that's internal, something that doesn't fade. Now that phrase, a quiet spirit, I know it can be a controversial one, but the speaker offers a really specific way to think about it. The idea is to think of quiet less as being silent or timid, and more as being serene, tranquil. It's not about an absence of speech, but the presence of a deep, unshakable inner peace. It's presented as a form of strength, not weakness. Which, of course, brings up a huge question. Where on earth does that kind of inner strength and peace come from, especially when you're in a really difficult situation? And that brings us to our next section, the foundation. Really, where do you find the ability to have a gentle and quiet spirit when the one thing you want most for your partner to share your faith just isn't happening? And according to the sermon, the foundation for all this isn't the marriage itself. The speaker argues that the woman's ultimate hope, her security, her identity, has to be rooted in God. And that's what frees her. It frees her from needing her husband's approval or even his conversion to feel whole. It allows her to act out of love and strength instead of fear and desperation. Okay, so you put all this together, and what do you get? What does a woman with that kind of secure hope actually look like? Well, that brings us to our final section, the outcome. And the text offers a really powerful and maybe surprising conclusion. To illustrate this whole idea, the passage pulls out a famous historical example, Sarah, from the Old Testament, the wife of Abraham. But the specific moment the text zooms in on is fascinating. It's not some big public display of submission. It's a private thought. Sarah is talking to herself, and in that private moment, she refers to her husband Abraham as my Lord. So why that tiny private moment? Well, the speaker's analysis is that this shows her default setting. It wasn't a show for anybody else. It was a genuine core attitude of respect that came out even when she was just thinking to herself, even in a moment of doubt. And this all builds up to this final description of a fearless woman, a woman who hopes in God, who submits to her husband out of that deep security, who fills her life with good works, and, this is the kicker, is not afraid of anything that is frightening. So the passage flips the script. This posture isn't presented as weakness or vulnerability, but as profound, fearless strength. So we're left with this really powerful question. This ancient text, seen through this lens, is presenting a model of female strength that's rooted in inner peace and a hope that's placed completely outside of human relationships. It's a fascinating idea, and it kind of makes you stop and think, how does that compare to our modern definitions of what it means to be a powerful woman?